Hi there, I'm Josh, and today we are talking about the GTX 960 in 2024. Now, the version that I have is an Asus Strix model, so I'm going to go over the specs for that specific one, but GTX 960s nowadays, the memory clock that's like 10% faster isn't going to make too much of a difference when it comes to actual real-time performance. The GTX 960 has 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 VRAM, 1024 CUDA cores, a base clock of 1228 MHz, and a boost clock of 1291 MHz, with a memory clock of 1800 MHz, and requires a 6-pin power connector in order to function. So a little while back, we tested the GTX 750 Ti, and I wasn't sure how that was going to perform, but this time we're hopping a generation forward to the GTX 960 to see how that does in 2024. So let's hop into the benchmarks. First up, Star Wars Outlaws at 720p with the lowest settings and ultra performance FSR. I did not even bother benchmarking this because it was completely unplayable. So you're not going to be able to play AAA titles that were made in 2024 on this card unless they are super optimized. And we'll get into some of those titles later. But for right now, this is kind of setting the standard for other games in this time period that just are going to really struggle on the GTX 960. For instance, Dragon's Dogma 2, another game that came out this year at 720p with the lowest settings, ran with an average frame rate of 11, a 1% low of 6, and a 0.1% low of 5. So although the 1% and 0.1% lows were consistent, they were consistently bad, and this game is also unplayable. But to get to some good news, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 at 1080p with the 67% resolution scale, so we were running it around 768p at the minimum preset, ran with an average frame rate of 66 FPS, a 1% low of 44, and a 0.1% low of 6. That 6 only showed up in pause menus when I was changing the loadout and stuff like that, so the 0.1% low is completely negligible. It wasn't like that in the actual game itself. So although we were playing it closer to 720p, this was still very playable, and it didn't look that bad. I think that this is a fine way to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and I think because Black Ops 6 is so similar, when Black Ops 6 comes out, I'll do an updated test, but until then, I think Black Ops 6 will probably also run fine on this machine. Now, I also threw in some older titles as well, like Destiny 2 at 1080p with the lowest settings. We saw an average frame rate of 65. So older games like this are still very popular. Destiny 2 is a hugely popular game. And if you're looking to play Destiny 2 on your old GTX 960, then you will be able to at full 1080p with no issues staying above 60 FPS. This was a perfectly good experience to enjoy this game on, and I had no issues whatsoever. I didn't feel anything. Obviously, the 1% and 0.1% lows aren't present because MSI Afterburner doesn't work with Destiny 2, but there was nothing that I could see with my general just viewing eye that would make this unplayable. Another game that MSI Afterburner can't run on is CS2. At 1080p with the low settings, we saw an average frame rate of 150, so again, no issues whatsoever playing this game. If you really want a high frame rate, then you might want to drop the resolution down to 720p. But I think for Counter-Strike 2 especially, 150 FPS is perfectly fine, all things considered, because although it is an esports title that you want high frame rates on, it also is one of the best looking esports titles right now. The Dead Game X Defiant, I don't know why I always rag on this game so much, I actually like it, but at 1080p with the lowest settings, X Defiant ran with an average frame rate of 58, a 1% low of 33, and a 0.1% low of 19. Now, this game was very weird. It had a 60 FPS cap, despite the fact that I tried many things to get it to run at above 60 FPS. But as you can see, we weren't hitting that cap all the time with our average frame rate. So I think that turning down the resolution would probably be a smart move if you're looking for a consistent 60 FPS in a flick shooter like this, especially because some parts of the map did struggle quite a bit and we're going into the low 40s. I would recommend probably dropping the resolution on this one. Another esports title, Overwatch 2 at 1080p with the high preset, ran with an average frame rate of 86 FPS, a 1% low of 60, and a 0.1% low of 16. So that 0.1% low is also not indicative of an actual real-world experience. I didn't have any issues playing this game. Obviously, that's represented by the fact that the 1% low was still above 60 FPS. So this game was entirely playable on this graphics card. Esports titles are going to run fine on cards like this. If you want to drop the settings to get a higher frame rate, you certainly can. I was surprised to pick high right out of the box, but it's ran well, so no complaints here. And of course, older games are going to run fine on this as well. Skyrim Special Edition at 1080p with the Ultra preset ran with an average frame rate of 60 FPS, a 1% low of 60 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 55 FPS. So no issues playing a game like Skyrim on this graphics card. If you end up finding lower frame rates further into the game, you don't have to play at ultra quality, so no issues whatsoever. The 960 is great for a game like this, and which is why cards like this honestly hold up so well, is because there's such a plethora of older games to play on them. Resident Evil 4 at 720p with the lowest preset with no FSR or anything like that, ran with an average frame rate of 55 FPS, a 1% low of 49, and a 0.1% low of 47. So you're not going to hit 60 FPS unless you turn on FSR, but I think at 720p it's better to just run this game as is and kind of deal with the lower frame rate, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. But that, of course, is up to personal preference. And last but not least, Baldur's Gate 3 at 720p with the lowest preset, ran with an average frame rate of 88, a 1% low of 52, and a 0.1% low of 20. So this game is always really hard for me to benchmark for some reason, so the numbers on this one are always just through walking through a heavily, densely populated town, and then going through smaller areas. And the game's frame rate fluctuates a lot during this time, so you're not going to have any issues staying above 60 FPS, but it's not going to be 88 all the time. So if you're not looking to play super intensive games, the GTX 960 is still a decent option if you get it for a good price. I would say $50, $40, somewhere around there. You're going to have no problems playing esports titles and newer but graphically not impressive games. For instance, Baldur's Gate 3 ran perfectly fine despite being a newer game, and you're going to have no problems playing older games either. So I think that a card like this is still worthy of being talked about. But if you're looking to buy something new, not new, but something used, but you're looking to get something new to your collection, I would recommend the 1066 gig or even better the 1650 or 1660 Ti or Super models, because those are going to run a lot better, but they are significantly more expensive. So keep an eye out for a good deal on those. I think you're going to have a much better time playing any AAA game on those. But the GTX 960, if you still have one and you're rocking one and you're enjoying yourself, then you should have no issues whatsoever playing some modern games, esports titles, and older games. And I think that a graphics card like this will make like a budget build or like a Dell Optiplex build work pretty okay. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.